So for the Tae Eum body type, we're dealing with a different type of organ system. The Tae Eum body type is born with a stronger liver system and a weaker lung system. Okay, so the liver system is stronger, and the lung system is weaker. Remember, we're talking about systems here. So systems are more than just the organs themselves. They are the organs plus the accompanying organs in that system. So the lungs encompass the esophagus, the pleural cavity, the thoracic cavity, the upper, the thoracic spine, okay, the heart as well, and the liver encompasses the small intestine, okay, the gallbladder, the lumbar spine, and everything that you can imagine in this area that surrounds the liver. The Tae Eum, now remember, Tae Eum, Tae in Korean means larger, and okay, this is Tae in Korean Hangul writing, and this is and this means yin, so larger or greater yin. Now, what we are saying here is not that they have more yin than, say, the So body type, or the Tae Yang has more yang than the So Yang body type. It's saying that the yin is more stable, it's more solid, okay? So if we look at this circle here, and we say that on the top of the circle we have the So Yang, or Xiao Yang in Chinese, lesser yang, and on the bottom we have the So or lesser yin. Okay, and and then in between we'll have the Tae Yang and the Tae greater yang and greater yin. So if we look at this as a continuum, okay, Tae Yang So-yang, Tae Eum So, Tae Yang So-yang, Tae Eum So. What we see here is that here we have an axis, okay, or a climax, or at the top and the bottom we have an area, a zenith, where the energy is going to shift to the opposite poles. So what's happening is with the So and So-yang, there's constantly shifting of energy going on. With the Tae Yang and Tae Eum, that energy is more stable. Now, it doesn't mean that the Tae Yang and Tae Eum Chapter body types are more healthy in general. It just means that these body types' energies are more stable, okay? And sometimes stability can lead to stagnation, right? So we're not necessarily saying that these are healthier body types. The So and So-yang have more unstable energy. In other words, the So energy can easily shift to yang, shifting to yang. The So Yang energy can easily shift to okay? This is why their energies are a bit unstable. And so the Tae Yang and Tae Eum energies are more subject to stagnation of the yang and yin, because there's more stability there. The So and So Yang are more subject to the shift, and that shift manifests as heat and cold, okay? So the So is more affected by cold disorder than any of the other body types, and the So Yang is affected by heat disorders more so than any of the other body types, more sensitive. The liver function in Sasang medicine has a parallel to the liver function in Western medicine. The liver function in Sasang medicine primarily is in charge of absorbing energy, okay? We call this 흡기 in Korean, 흡기. 흡기. This 흡기 means absorption, okay? The the lung is in charge of 호기. 호기. This 호기 is to ho, like when we exhale, ho, we make that sound, right? This is exhalation or excretion of energy, gi, okay? Hup is the absorption, taking in of gi, which is hup, gi, okay? So the lungs, hogi, the liver, hup, gi. So being born with a stronger liver system, the Tae Eum individual has more powerful absorption energy. And so the liver is constantly like a sponge absorbing energy from its surroundings, okay? So it's taking in. So that the Tae Eum is very good at, in many cases, in preserving energy, holding it for long periods of time without getting as fatigued, say as the Som or the Soyang. But they also have a tendency towards holding on to too much energy, like body fat, weight, feeling as if they have a weight that's bogging them down, okay, pushing down. So the liver energy subjects them to stagnation of blood, stagnation of energy, stagnation of fat tissue, and other fluids. If you remember, we talked about Jin, Go, Yu, Ek, okay? So the Yu fluids are associated with the liver, right? Yu, okay, Yu. The Chinese character for Yu is this one, which means oil, okay? So it's an oily fluid. If the liver energy isn't flowing smoothly, there will be too much of this oily fluid produced. If it's flowing smoothly, there will be just enough to lubricate the joints, lubricate everything in the body. So this imbalance of the liver causes stagnation of Yu fluids, which is the oily fluids, and excess absorption, which is what the Tae Eum individual's body is more subject to. The other thing about the Tae Eum is the weaker lung system. And like Western medicine, the lungs are responsible for immunity. Okay, so protecting us from getting colds, coughs, common colds, influenzas, epidemic disorders. Remember, the lungs are the very first entrance into the body of all these things. We breathe them in, bacteria, viral activity in the air, right? So the lung is responsible for immunity, and since the Tae Eum individual has a weaker lung system, their immune system tends to be very sensitive. Tae Eum clients tend to, if they are even slightly unhealthy, tend to get frequent colds, tend to get allergies. As children, they tend to get tonsillitis, ear infections, strep throat, more so than the other body types, even if they are slightly unhealthy. So the also asthma. Asthma is for Tae Eum child is very, very common when the Tae Eum's lungs are still developing. Remember, the Tae Eum's lungs will develop much slower than the other body types will, because it's their weaker system. So if we have a human being, right? I'll make it a little bit easier to see. Okay, here's my human being. Okay. So the Tae Eum individual will have a weaker barrier around them, okay? This barrier is the Wei Qi, or protective energy. Okay, but they will have a stronger, more solid internal liver system. So what happens is this external barrier will be weaker. So what we'll try to get inside is the pathogenic energy. When does this happen? If you recall, the very first line of defense for any body type is their Song energy, their Song nature. Remember? The Song nature, if it's balanced, so is the immune system. Much easier to fight off epidemic, much easier to fight off common colds, influenza, okay? Fever diseases, right? So let's just say that Tae Eum individual has imbalance of their Song emotion. What is their Song emotion or Song nature? It's joy, right? Joy. So imbalance of joy will immediately affect their immunity, okay? And so the pathogen will try to get in. And since they are a yin body type, it's the cold pathogen that affects them the most. The Som and the Tae Eum are both affected mainly by cold pathogens. So the cold pathogen is going to try to get in. So it gets past their lung shield. Okay, but they have this solid liver. So if their strong energy is strong enough, this liver energy will counteract that by pushing outwards. And if it's strong enough, it's going to push the pathogen out. Okay? So the action of the energy working its way inwards from the exterior, imbalance of the song emotion of the Tae Eum is called Now, if you recall, for the Tae Eum individual, it was the kidney heat causing exterior heat situation. This is esophageal cold causing exterior cold situation. And it's affecting the esophagus, okay? It's affecting the esophagus. So this esophageal cold is the external energy trying to get in. Now for the Tae Eum type, it's the kidney, right? Kidney heat causing exterior heat syndrome. This is esophageal cold causing exterior cold syndrome or cold disorder. Why? Because for the Tae Eum individual, okay, the yang organs are the exterior related organs, exterior illness related organs. For the Tae Eum, it is the yin organs that cause the exterior related issues, okay? For the So-yang, what is it again? The So-yang is like the Tae Eum, okay? It's the yin organs that cause the external related disorders. For the So-yang, it's the spleen. For the Tae Eum, it's the kidneys. For the Tae Eum and Tae Yang, so the greater yin and greater yang constitutions, it's the yang organs, okay? So for the Tae Eum, it's the esophagus, which is related with the lung system. With the Tae Yang, it's the small intestine, okay? Which is related with their weaker liver system. Okay, so why is that? So here we have esophageal cold. So even though the lung system is the weakest, so because the lung system is the weakest, the esophagus is part of that lung system. So this energy is getting past their shield and going into first where? The esophagus. Okay, now the esophagus in Sasang medicine is not just related with the introduction of food, even though that's a part of it, but it's also related with the introduction of energy into the body. So we're talking in this type of situation, common cold, asthma, related to the lungs as well, okay? So lungs and esophagus are seen as two of the same, but with the Tae Eum individual, it's very common because the esophagus is involved that there's some digestive disorder as well going on here, okay? So the formulas like Tae Eum Joitang are very good for common cold, treating common cold, and digestion as well. So the energy is getting in and affecting the esophagus, and that's where it gets stuck, okay? So what happens is the esophagus cold will relate to external cold disorders. Now you have this liver here, which is going to try and produce heat to balance it out and push everything out. And when that happens, if the cold is gone, great. If not, this is also a situation that the liver can. This can be a situation where the liver itself causes imbalance. Okay, so if the Tae Eum is uncomfortable, unsatisfied, cannot find their joy, their song emotion, then it's very possible that they are going to go to their jung emotion and find and express an imbalance of their jung emotion. What is the Tae Eum's jung emotion? It is complacency, laziness, okay, excess comfort, okay, escaping, okay. In that case, what's going to happen is the liver will get out of control. And when the liver gets out of control, another syndrome, which is called liver heat, causing internal heat syndrome. Can occur. So a little heat in the liver gets pushed out and the cold is gone, no problem with their jung emotion. But if the Tae Eum is unsatisfied, in other words, when we talk about the pathogen entering the body, we're not just saying that this is a cold or influenza or this. We're talking about discomfort, okay? Lack of joy. We're talking about the Tae Eum who is not happy, not satisfied with their life, right? So if this happens, they push a little heat from the liver out, and then everything might be okay. If not, then what happens is the liver heat gets out of control. Now remember, they're not a yang body type, so this is not like a really extreme heat. This is just heat that is imbalanced, okay? And that's what we call liver heat causing internal heat syndrome. This is an imbalance of the jung emotion, okay? The jung emotion. So a little heat pushes out the cold, everything's good. Too much heat accumulates. Then what can happen is you're getting lots and lots of heat around here, okay? Building up around the liver, and the cold is continuing to come in, okay? So you have the heat, it's actually getting trapped inside the liver, and a lot of things can happen at that point, okay? The liver itself can get inflamed. We see a lot of Tae Eum individual in this type of situation with fatty liver disease, with ALT and APT levels increasing, so liver enzyme levels, high blood pressure. A lot of the time this heat can accumulate up here, causing headaches, okay, and high blood pressure. As the heat rises upwards, it's very possible the heat can rise upwards, and liver heat causing external heat syndrome. So this is a very, very common scenario. Libido might be an issue because all the heat is trapped inside and not enough energy going down to the genital area. So there are two scenarios for the Tae Eum individual. One is external, related to song emotion, song nature, and the other is, and this is, the external is called esophageal cold, causing external cold disorder. The other one is heat, which is liver heat causing internal heat syndrome, okay? So it either has to do with their stronger organ system, the liver system, or their weaker organ system, which is their lung system. Okay. When the liver heat causing internal heat syndrome occurs, there is very rarely digestive-related symptoms like bloating, gas. Although these symptoms can occur, they usually occur because of heat, so they still have appetite. Okay. For the esophageal cold syndrome, they vary. If the digestive system is affected, there's very little appetite. There's bloating, gas. They might not be hungry for the next meal. There might be some diarrhea too. For the liver heat, since there's heat, the heat dries up the stool, tends to be more constipation. So Chinese rhubarb or dawang is used very commonly for the Tae Eum individual, even if they don't have constipation, to clear the heat, okay, and make sure their bowels are flowing. Because with so much absorption energy, it's very easy for the Tae Eum individual to get constipated. So it's very important that they constantly have a bowel flow, okay. Now with so much absorption, it's very hard for the Tae Eum to sweat, okay. Sweating is a big deal for the Tae Eum. If the Tae Eum sweats, Ijema says that they are healthy if they sweat regularly. If they don't sweat regularly, then it's a sign that they are weaker. So this sweat comes from the strength of the lungs, right? The lungs control the pores, lungs control the skin. So if we sweat more, our lungs are healthier, okay? In most cases. Now some cases we can have deficient sweat, but that's a different story. So what helps promote sweat? Herbs like ephedra, okay, so mahang, right? Mahang is commonly used for the esophageal cold syndrome because all we need to do for esophageal cold syndrome with the Tae Eum is open the pores, let out the sweat. And then it can help bring back joy in their life, right? Let out the stress, let out the tension, and the Tae Eum are now talking about joy again. So we can help with that with herbs, right? So formulas like mahang palpyeotang is commonly used for the Tae Eum individual, okay? Or mahang chonchontang. Both formulas have 마황 in them, 이페죠. Okay, so that's another common way. Now, with the heat syndrome, just opening up the pores and letting out sweat is not enough. We have to clear that heat trapped inside the body. There is another situation that we will eventually talk about further called Tae Eum is the Korean pronunciation. Here, in the Chinese pinyin is Feizao. Feizao. In the book, the translation I referred to as Feizao. Feizao means lung dryness syndrome, or Pejo means lung dryness syndrome. This Pejo is describing a situation where the heat is trapped inside the liver and continuously drying up the lungs. Remember, the lung is the weakest organ, so where is this heat going to go from the liver? It's going to pick on the lungs. When it picks on the lungs continuously over time, this is a situation that happens over time, the lungs will eventually dry out. When the lungs dry out, the skin also dries out, so the Tae Eum would feel very dryness, and their throat will feel dry. They also will experience palpitations, very commonly, especially after drinking coffee, insomnia, anxiety, fidgeting. So all these things where they're just feeling unsure, unsettled. This is a very common, what we call the Feizao syndrome. Feizao. This happens only amongst the weaker Tae Eum. It can be treated, but it takes a longer time. And in some cases it can't. Sometimes it's too way beyond. You might see this in a diabetic a Tae Eum individual where they have Feizao syndrome. So we'll talk more about it in different formulas that help, like Imun Omitang is a really common one, Imun Omitang. We use that for Feizao. Now Feizao can occur with esophageal cold when the lungs are very weak to begin with, but it can also occur as a result of liver heat over time, burning up the fluids in the lungs. So yeah, those are the three major syndromes of the Tae Eum individual. And now we're going to get into the esophageal cold causing external cold disorder a little further.